Pregnant wife discovers billionaire husband's shocking secret with secretary. What happens next? You're inside her. In our bed. While I'm carrying your daughter, Val, I can explain. Don't you dare speak to me while you're still inside her. Have you ever walked into a room and felt your entire world collapse in a single heartbeat? What you're about to hear is the story of Valentina Moreau, a woman who thought she knew everything about love, trust, and the man she married. But sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of destroying us completely. At 7 months pregnant, Valentina discovered a betrayal so devastating that it didn't just break her heart, it nearly cost her everything. Including her life. And the life of her unborn daughter. If you've ever questioned whether you truly know the person sleeping next to you every night, you need to hear this story. Because what happened next will change how you think about love, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to rebuild your life from the ashes of betrayal. But first, if stories about real human resilience and the power of knowing your worth resonate with you, hit that like button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to remember this channel. Now, let me take you back to that morning in Malibu, when Valentina's perfect life began to unravel with a single lipstick tube. The morning mist clung to the windows of the Sinclair estate like secrets refusing to be told. Valentina Moreau Sinclair pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching the Pacific waves crash against the cliffs below. At 7 months pregnant, her body carried more than just their daughter. It held the weight of a marriage that had been slowly dissolving like sugar in rain. The silence in their bedroom felt different today. Not the comfortable quiet of two people who understood each other, but the hollow echo of a house where love had learned to whisper instead of sing. Her husband, Raphael Sinclair, hadn't kissed her forehead this morning. For 3 years, that kiss had been as certain as sunrise. Today, nothing. She traced circles over her swollen belly, feeling their daughter's gentle movements. "Good morning, little star," she whispered, using the nickname that had come naturally since the first ultrasound. But even the baby seemed restless today, her kicks more urgent than usual, as if sensing the storm gathering in her mother's chest. Valentina had learned to trust these instincts during pregnancy. The way her daughter would go still when Raphael raised his voice during business calls. The way she'd dance when Valentina played classical music. Today, the baby's restlessness felt like a warning. The marble floors felt cold beneath Valentina's bare feet as she made her way downstairs. The estate was too quiet. No espresso machine humming, no morning news murmuring from the kitchen television, no trace of Raphael's signature cologne lingering in the air. He was the CEO of Sinclair Aerospace, a man who built rockets that touched the stars, yet somehow couldn't find his way back to her heart. Their home was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the breathtaking Pacific coastline. But this morning, the beauty felt hollow. Like a museum exhibit of a life that had once been real. In the kitchen, she found the first crack in her carefully constructed denial. A wine glass sat abandoned on the marble island. Not hers. She hadn't touched alcohol since the pregnancy began. The glass still held a faint residue of red wine, and beside it, something that made her blood run cold. A tube of lipstick. Coral pink. Too bright, too young. The kind of color their live-in assistant, Bianca, favored. Valentina's breath caught in her throat. Bianca, the girl she'd rescued from a toxic relationship 8 months ago. The girl who'd cried in her arms about feeling unwanted, who'd become like a younger sister. The girl she'd taught to make proper risotto, who'd helped her paint the nursery walls the color of champagne bubbles. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the lipstick. It was warm, recently used. The wine glass still held that faint residue, and beside it, a pair of earrings. Delicate gold hoops that definitely weren't hers. Her ears had become too sensitive during pregnancy to wear anything but the softest studs. The evidence wasn't hidden. It was carelessly scattered, as if whoever left it had been too distracted to care about being discovered. Or perhaps too arrogant to think they would be. Valentina's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby had gone still. No kicks, no movements. Just an eerie quiet that made her heart race. She pressed both palms against her stomach, willing their daughter to respond. "Come on, little star. Move for mama." Nothing. A sound from upstairs made her freeze. Soft laughter, breathless and feminine. Not her laughter. She knew that sound. Had heard it countless times when Bianca was on the phone with friends, when she was happy, when she was satisfied. Valentina's world tilted. The kitchen blurred at the edges as she gripped the marble counter. 7 months pregnant, her body already strained from carrying life, and now this. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her knees weak. She could leave. Walk out the front door, drive away, preserve what little dignity remained. But something deeper than pride pulled her toward the stairs. She needed to see. Needed to know. Needed to look into the eyes of the man who'd promised to love her through everything and see what those promises had become. Each step up the curved staircase felt like walking toward her own execution. Her hand slid along the polished banister, the same railing where Raphael had once surprised her with rose petals on their anniversary. The same stairs where he'd carried her the night they found out about the pregnancy, spinning her around despite her protests about being dizzy. Now she climbed alone, her swollen body heavy with more than just their child. The sounds grew clearer as she reached the landing. Soft murmurs, the creak of their bed, the unmistakable rhythm of intimacy. Her intimacy. Her bed. Her husband. Oh God, Bianca's voice drifted through the partially open door. Right there, Raphael. Don't stop. Valentina's legs nearly gave out. That was her name. Bianca was moaning. Her husband's name. In her bedroom. In her bed, the bedroom door was ajar, just enough to let betrayal seep through the crack like poison gas. Valentina stood frozen, her hand pressed against her belly where their daughter lay silent. She could still turn back. Could pretend she'd never seen the lipstick, never heard the laughter, never felt the cold absence of his morning kiss, but she'd spent too many months pretending already. Pretending his late nights were just work. Pretending his distant touches were just stress. Pretending the way Bianca's eyes lingered on him was just admiration. She pushed the door open, the scene before her shattered something fundamental in her chest. Raphael, her husband of 4 years, the man who'd once written her love letters in 3 languages, was moving above Bianca in their bed. The bed where they'd conceived their daughter. The bed where he'd once whispered promises about forever. Bianca's legs were wrapped around him, her head thrown back in pleasure, dark hair spilled across Valentina's pillow. The sheets, Egyptian cotton that Valentina had chosen for their wedding registry, were tangled around their bodies like a mockery of the vows they'd once shared. For a moment, time suspended itself. Valentina stood in the doorway, 7 months pregnant, watching her world collapse in real time. The baby in her womb remained still, as if even she understood that everything was about to change. You're inside her, Valentina said, her voice cutting through the room like broken crystal. In our bed. While I'm carrying your daughter. Raphael froze mid-motion. His head snapped toward the door, his face draining of color as if he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Maybe the woman he'd married, the woman who trusted him with her whole heart, had died the moment she walked through that door. Bianca gasped, scrambling for the sheets, her face flushed with shame and something else. Defiance. As if she'd been caught stealing cookies, not destroying a family. Valentina didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Didn't collapse into hysterics. She simply stood there, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the doorframe, and let the truth settle into her bones like winter. Val, I can explain, Raphael started, but she cut him off with a look that could have frozen the Pacific. Don't, she said quietly. Don't you dare speak to me while you're still inside her. The room fell silent except for the sound of 3 hearts beating at different rhythms. His with panic, Bianca's with guilt, and hers with the slow, steady pulse of a woman watching her life end and something else begin. Raphael pulled away from Bianca, reaching for his clothes, but Valentina had already seen enough. The damage was carved into her retinas, burned into her memory. She would never unsee this moment, never unfeel the way her heart cracked like ice under pressure. I gave you everything, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I gave you my body, my dreams, my trust. I carried your child while you. Her voice broke, not from sadness but from the sheer weight of realization. She'd been living in a marriage that existed only in her imagination. While she'd been growing their daughter, planning their future, believing in their love, he'd been planning his betrayal. Valentina, please, Bianca's voice was small, pathetic. It's not what you think. Valentina turned her gaze to the girl she'd loved like a sister. The girl she'd found crying outside a coffee shop, bruised and broken from an abusive relationship. The girl she'd brought into their home, their family, their lives. Not what I think. Valentina's voice was deadly calm. You're naked in my bed with my husband while I'm 7 months pregnant with his child. What exactly should I think, Bianca? It just happened, Bianca stammered, clutching the sheet to her chest. We didn't mean for it to happen. Nothing just happens, Valentina replied. Every touch was a choice. Every kiss was a decision. Every time you looked at him the way you're supposed to look at someone who isn't married to someone else, that was a choice. The room began to spin. The edges of her vision blurred as the full impact hit her. 7 months pregnant, standing in her bedroom doorway, watching her husband with the girl she'd treated like family. The girl she'd comforted, protected, loved. How long? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raphael was pulling on his pants, his hands shaking. Val, please, let's talk about this downstairs. How long? She repeated, louder this time. 3 months, Bianca whispered. 3 months. Valentina's mind reeled. 3 months of lies. 3 months of coming home to both of them, eating dinner together, laughing together, while they shared this secret. 3 months of Bianca helping her with the nursery, talking about the baby, pretending to be excited about becoming an aunt figure. 3 months of Raphael making love to her with hands that had touched another woman. 3 months of him kissing her goodnight after kissing someone else. 3 months of living a lie so complete it made her question everything she thought she knew about reality. You helped me paint the nursery, Valentina said to Bianca, her voice hollow. You helped me pick out baby clothes. You held my hair when I had morning sickness. That I'm sorry, Bianca sobbed. I'm so sorry, Val. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Valentina replied. Every day for 3 months, you looked me in the eye and lied. You sat at my table, ate my food, accepted my love, and you were sleeping with my husband. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that Valentina felt something inside her break. Not just her heart, but something deeper. Her faith in human goodness. Her belief that love could conquer anything. Her trust in her own judgment. That I trusted you, she said, looking between them. Both of you. I trusted you with my life, my home, my family. And you used that trust to destroy me. Her knees buckled, the fall seemed to happen in slow motion. Her body, heavy with pregnancy and shock, couldn't support the weight of what she'd discovered. She reached for the doorframe, but her fingers slipped. Her knees hit the marble floor first, then her side, and finally, the impact that would haunt Raphael forever. Her belly, the sound of her body hitting the floor was soft, almost gentle. But the silence that followed was deafening. Valentina. Raphael's voice cracked with terror as he lunged toward her, but it was too late. She lay motionless on the cold marble, her silk nightgown twisted around her legs, her dark hair fanned out like spilled ink. A bruise was already forming on her temple where her head had struck the floor. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she'd been about to say something important. Her arms lay at awkward angles, and most terrifying of all, her belly, round and full with their daughter, was completely still. Is she breathing? Bianca stood frozen in the corner, clutching the sheet to her chest, her face pale with shock. Get out, Raphael snarled, not taking his eyes off Valentina. Get out of my house. Now, Raphael, get out. His voice echoed through the room with such fury that Bianca flinched. She didn't argue. She grabbed her clothes and fled, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the echo of her footsteps on the stairs. Raphael dropped to his knees beside his wife, his hands shaking as he gently touched her face. Val, baby, please. Open your eyes. Please, but Valentina didn't respond. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but her eyes remained closed, her body limp. He pressed his ear to her belly, listening desperately for any sign of movement from their daughter. Nothing. The silence was more terrifying than any scream. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed 911. My wife is pregnant, he choked into the phone. She fell. She's unconscious. Please, you have to help her. Help them both, sir, I need you to stay calm. The dispatcher's voice was professional, soothing. Is she breathing? Yes, but barely. And the baby, I can't feel the baby moving. How far along is she? 7 months. Please, you have to hurry, paramedics are on their way. I need you to check if she's bleeding anywhere. Raphael's hands moved over Valentina's body, checking for blood. There was none visible, but that didn't make him feel any better. Internal injuries could be just as deadly. I don't see any blood, he reported. Good. Now I need you to make sure her airway is clear and keep talking to her. Sometimes unconscious people can still hear. As he waited for the paramedics, Raphael held Valentina's hand and whispered apologies she couldn't hear. He told her about the first time he'd seen her at a gallery opening, how her laugh had made him forget every other woman in the room. He reminded her of their wedding day, how she'd cried during their vows because she'd never believed she could love someone so completely. I was so stupid, Val, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I had everything. I had you, and our baby, and a life most people only dream of. And I threw it all away for what? For nothing. For less than nothing. He talked about their daughter, about the names they'd chosen, about the nursery they'd painted together. He promised things he should have promised months ago. Fidelity, presence, the kind of love that didn't waver when life got complicated. But Valentina lay still, and their daughter remained silent, and Raphael realized that some promises come too late to matter. The sound of sirens grew louder, and soon the house was filled with paramedics. They worked with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, stabilizing her neck, preparing her for transport. Raphael followed them to the ambulance, his heart breaking with every step. Sir, are you the husband? One of the paramedics asked. Yes. Is she going to be okay? Is the baby okay? We're doing everything we can. The next few hours will be critical. As they raced through the streets of Malibu toward the hospital, Raphael held Valentina's hand and prayed to a God he'd forgotten he believed in. He prayed for her life, for their daughter's life, for a chance to undo the last few hours and choose differently. But some choices, once made, can't be unmade. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. And some falls shatter more than just bones. They shatter the very foundation of what two people thought they'd built together. The hospital waiting room became Raphael's purgatory. He sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing the clothes he'd thrown on in panic, his hair disheveled, his eyes red from tears he couldn't stop shedding. Other families came and went. A man with a broken arm. A woman with chest pains. A child with a fever. Normal emergencies. Fixable problems. Raphael envied them all. Hours passed before a doctor emerged with news. Dr. Sarah Chen was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She approached Raphael with the careful demeanor of someone who delivered life-changing news for a living. Damar. Sinclair. I'm Dr. Chen. I've been treating your wife. Raphael stood so quickly he nearly fell over. How is she? How's the baby? Your wife is stable, but she's in a medically induced coma. The fall caused swelling in her brain, and we need to keep her sedated while her body heals. And the baby, Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. The fetal heartbeat is present but weak. We're monitoring closely. The next 48 hours will be critical for both mother and child. Raphael nodded numbly, unable to process the medical terminology. All he understood was that his wife and daughter were fighting for their lives because of his choices. Can I see her? Of course. But I should prepare you. She looks peaceful, but seeing her like this can be difficult for family members. When he was finally allowed into the ICU, the sight of Valentina nearly brought him to his knees again. She looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. Her face was pale, peaceful in sleep, but the bruise on her temple was a stark reminder of how she'd gotten there. He pulled a chair close to her bedside and took her hand. It was warm but unresponsive, like holding a beautiful statue. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Val. I don't know how I became the kind of man who could hurt you like this. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. The machines beeped steadily around them, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat. Both hers and their daughter's. 2 lives hanging in the balance because of his betrayal. He talked to her for hours, telling her things he should have said when she could hear them. He talked about how he'd fallen in love with her intelligence first, then her kindness, then the way she made him want to be better than he was. He talked about how somewhere along the way, he'd stopped trying to deserve her and started taking her for granted. Do you remember our first date? He asked her, still form. You wore that blue dress, the one that matched your eyes. We went to that little Italian place in Santa Monica, and you ordered the most complicated dish on the menu just to see if they could make it right. You said life was too short for boring food and predictable choices. A tear slipped down his cheek. I became a predictable choice, didn't I? I became the boring food. I stopped trying to surprise you, to court you, to make you feel special. I just assumed you'd always be there. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, the only sign had life continued inside her still form. I know you can't forgive me, he said, pressing her hand to his cheek. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. But please don't leave me. Don't leave our daughter. She needs you. I need you. A nurse came in to check Valentina's vitals, moving quietly around the machines. She was an older woman with gray hair and gentle hands. You should go home and get some rest, she told Raphael kindly. Get a shower, change clothes. She's stable now. I can't leave her, the nurse smiled sadly. I've been doing this for 30 years, honey. The guilt you're carrying, it's not going to help her heal. What she needs now is for you to take care of yourself so you can take care of her when she wakes up. Not if. When. Raphael clung to that certainty like a lifeline, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when every beep of the machines reminded him that he'd almost lost everything that mattered. Not when their daughter's heartbeat was still weak, still uncertain. He stayed by her side through the night, holding her hand and making promises he hoped he'd have the chance to keep. He promised to be faithful, to be present, to never again take for granted the miracle of her love. He promised to be the father their daughter deserved, the husband Valentina had always needed. As dawn broke over the Pacific, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and pink, Raphael felt something shift. Not hope, exactly, but a determination he hadn't felt in months. Whatever happened next, whatever Valentina decided when she woke up, he would spend the rest of his life trying to earn back even a fraction of what he'd thrown away. The baby monitor attached to Valentina's belly suddenly showed increased activity. Their daughter was moving, kicking, fighting. As if she too had decided that giving up wasn't an option. That's it, little star, Raphael whispered, using Valentina's nickname for their daughter. You fight. You and your mama, you both fight. And in that moment, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines and the soft whisper of ventilators, Raphael Sinclair began the long journey toward becoming the man his family deserved. It was a journey that would test every assumption he'd ever made about love, forgiveness, and the price of redemption, but first, Valentina had to wake up. And when she did, the real reckoning would begin. On the second day, something changed. Valentina's fingers twitched in his grasp, so slightly he almost missed it. Then her eyelids fluttered, and slowly, like someone emerging from a deep dream, she opened her eyes. Val. Raphael leaned forward, his heart pounding. You're awake. Thank God, you're awake. She turned her head toward him slowly, her eyes focusing with effort. When she looked at him, he saw recognition there, and something else. Remembrance. She remembered everything, the baby, she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. She's okay, Raphael said quickly. The doctors say she's strong. Like her mother. Valentina's hand moved to her belly, and as if summoned by her touch, their daughter kicked. It was the first strong movement in days, and both parents felt it like a miracle. Tears slipped down Valentina's cheeks, but they weren't tears of joy. They were tears of loss. For the marriage that had died in that bedroom, for the trust that could never be rebuilt, for the family that would never be the same that I saw you, she said simply. I saw you with her. Raphael's throat closed. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were inside her in our bed while I was carrying your daughter, she continued, her voice gaining strength. In the bed where we made love. In the bed where we conceived her. Each word was a knife, precise and cutting. Raphael took them all, knowing he deserved every one. That I trusted you, Valentina said. I trusted her. I brought her into our home, into our family. I loved her like a sister. She meant nothing to me, Raphael said desperately. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. Don't, Valentina cut him off. Don't minimize it. Don't make it smaller than it was. You made a choice. Every time you touched her, every time you looked at her the way you used to look at me, every time you came to our bed after being with her, those were choices. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything that could never be unsaid. That I almost died, Valentina said quietly. Our daughter almost died. Because you couldn't keep your promises. Raphael dropped his head, unable to meet her eyes. I know. I'll never forgive myself. Good, she said. Because I won't either. Dr. Chen entered the room, clipboard in hand, her expression cautiously optimistic. Mrs. Sinclair, it's wonderful to see you awake. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, Valentina replied, attempting a weak smile. That's actually not far from the truth. You took quite a fall. We've been monitoring you and the baby closely. I'm happy to report that while you both gave us a scare, you're both showing signs of recovery. The baby, her heartbeat has strengthened considerably since you woke up. It's remarkable how connected mother and child are, even in utero. Your emotional state directly affects hers. Valentina glanced at Raphael, then back at the doctor. When can I go home? Let's take this one day at a time. We want to monitor you for at least another 48 hours to make sure there are no complications. Head injuries can be unpredictable, especially during pregnancy. After Dr. Chen left, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Raphael wanted to fill it with apologies, with explanations, with promises. But Valentina's earlier words echoed in his mind. Don't minimize it. The days that followed were a careful dance of healing and distance. Valentina's body recovered slowly, but the emotional wounds remained raw and open. Raphael stayed by her side, not because she wanted him there, but because he couldn't bear to leave. He brought her flowers she didn't acknowledge. White roses, her favorites, that sat wilting on the bedside table. He read to her from books she didn't seem to hear. He talked to their daughter through Valentina's belly, feeling the baby respond to his voice even as her mother remained distant. On the third day, Valentina's sister Elena arrived from New York. She was everything Valentina wasn't. Where Valentina was gentle and trusting, Elena was sharp and suspicious. Where Valentina saw the best in people, Elena assumed the worst. And right now, Raphael was grateful for that difference. You son of a bitch, were Elena's first words to him as she entered the hospital room. Elena, Valentina said weakly. Please. No, Val. I'm not going to be polite to the man who put you in this hospital bed. Elena turned her fury on Raphael. With your assistant? Really? Could you be more of a cliché? It's not what you think, Raphael started, but Elena cut him off with a laugh that could have cut glass. Oh, it's exactly what I think. My sister is 7 months pregnant, and you're screwing around with some girl young enough to be your daughter. You're pathetic. Valentina watched this exchange with detached interest, as if she were watching a movie about someone else's life. Elena, Raphael said carefully, I know you're angry. Angry? Elena stepped closer to him. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. My sister almost died because of you. Your daughter almost died because of you. And you want to talk about angry? You're right, Raphael said quietly. You're absolutely right. Elena seemed taken aback by his agreement. She'd clearly come prepared for a fight, and his capitulation left her momentarily speechless. "That I've been thinking," Valentina said one afternoon, breaking a silence that had lasted hours. "About what comes next." Raphael looked up from the magazine he'd been pretending to read. "What do you mean?" "I mean after she's born. After I'm healed. What happens to us?" The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. "That I want us to try," Raphael said carefully. "I want to earn your trust back. I want to be the husband you deserved from the beginning." Valentina studied his face for a long moment. "You can't earn back what you threw away, Raphael. Trust isn't a commodity you can buy with good behavior and pretty words." "Then what?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What do? We learn to live with what we've become," she said. "Two people who share a daughter and a history of broken promises." The finality in her voice terrified him more than any anger could have. "I love you," he said desperately. "I know I have no right to say that after what I did, but I love you. I've always loved you." Valentina's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "Love isn't enough, Raphael. Love without respect, without fidelity, without honor, that's not love at all. That's just selfishness wearing love's mask." She turned away from him, her hand resting on her belly where their daughter continued to grow, oblivious to the wreckage of her parents' marriage. "Our daughter will be born into a broken home," Valentina said. "But she'll be born to a mother who knows her worth and a father who's learning the cost of his choices." Raphael wanted to argue, to fight for them, to promise he could change everything. But he'd made too many promises already, and they'd all turned to ash in his mouth. Instead, he reached out and gently placed his hand over hers on her belly. For a moment, she didn't pull away. For a moment, they were just two people feeling their daughter move between them, a bridge across the chasm of their broken trust. "That I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve her," Raphael said quietly. "And trying to deserve the forgiveness I'll never receive." Valentina closed her eyes, feeling their daughter's strong kicks against her ribs. "Then start now," she whispered. "Start by being the man she needs you to be, even if I can never trust you to be the man I needed." Elena had been watching this exchange from the corner of the room, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Val, you don't have to decide anything right now. You're still healing. Both of you are." "I know," Valentina replied. "But I also know that some things can't be undone. Some betrayals are too complete to survive." That night, after Elena had gone back to her hotel and the hospital had settled into its quiet evening rhythm, Valentina lay awake staring at the ceiling. The baby was active, rolling and kicking as if she were trying to find a comfortable position in her increasingly cramped quarters. Raphael had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still resting on the edge of her mattress. In sleep, he looked younger, more vulnerable. She could see traces of the man she'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. The man who'd written her poetry in 3 languages, who'd surprised her with weekend trips to Paris, who'd cried when she told him she was pregnant, but she could also see the stranger he'd become. The man who could look her in the eye every morning while carrying on an affair with someone she'd trusted. The man who could make love to her with hands that had touched another woman. The man who could build a life of lies so complete that she'd never suspected. A contraction rippled across her belly, mild but unmistakable. She'd been having them on and off for the past day, but this one was stronger. She pressed the call button for the nurse. "Mrs. Sinclair." The night nurse, a young woman named Sarah, appeared quickly. "What's wrong?" "I think I'm having contractions." Sarah checked the monitors, her expression growing concerned. "Let me get Dr. Chen." The activity woke Raphael, who sat up immediately. "What's happening?" "The baby might be coming," Valentina said, another contraction gripping her, "but it's too early. She's not due for another 2 months." Dr. Chen arrived within minutes, her hair pulled back hastily and her clothes wrinkled from sleep. She'd clearly been called in from home. "Let's take a look," she said, examining Valentina quickly. "You're definitely in labor. The stress from the fall, combined with the emotional trauma, has likely triggered early labor. Is the baby okay?" Raphael asked, his voice tight with fear. "At 32 weeks, she has a good chance, but she'll need to spend time in the NICU. We need to get you to the delivery room now." the next few hours passed in a blur of medical activity. Valentina was wheeled into the delivery room, Raphael beside her, both of them terrified and unprepared for what was happening. "That I can't do this," Valentina gasped between contractions. "It's too early." "She's too small." "Yes, you can," Raphael said, squeezing her hand. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything. Don't," she said, pulling her hand away. "Don't pretend we're a team. Don't pretend this is some beautiful moment we're sharing." The words cut him, but he understood. Even in this moment, bringing their daughter into the world, the betrayal stood between them like a wall. "Mrs. Sinclair," Dr. Chen said from between her legs, "I can see the head. On the next contraction, I need you to push." Valentina bore down with everything she had, her face red with effort. Raphael wanted to help, to support her, but she'd made it clear she didn't want his comfort. "That's it," Dr. Chen encouraged. One more big push. With a final, tremendous effort, Valentina pushed their daughter into the world. The baby emerged tiny and purple, her cry weak but present. "She's beautiful," Dr. Chen said, quickly clamping and cutting the cord. "But she needs immediate attention." A team of NICU specialists was waiting, and they whisked the baby away before either parent could get a good look at her. Valentina collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and emptied. "Is she okay?" she asked weakly. "She's breathing on her own, which is excellent," Dr. Chen said. "But at 32 weeks, her lungs aren't fully developed. She'll need support for a while." "Can I see her? Once we get you cleaned up and moved to recovery, we'll take you to the NICU." An hour later, Valentina sat in a wheelchair beside her daughter's isolette in the NICU. The baby was so small, barely 4 pounds, covered in wires and tubes. But she was alive, and she was fighting. "She's perfect," Valentina whispered, tears streaming down her face. Raphael stood behind her, afraid to get too close, afraid to intrude on this moment between mother and daughter. "What are we going to name her?" he asked quietly. Valentina was quiet for a long moment, studying their daughter's tiny face. "Sophia," she said finally. "It means wisdom. She's going to need a lot of that, growing up with parents like us." "Sophia," Raphael repeated. "It's perfect." The NICU nurse, an experienced woman named Margaret, approached them with a gentle smile. "Would you like to hold her?" Skin-to-skin contact is very beneficial for premature babies. Valentina nodded eagerly, and Margaret carefully lifted Sophia from the isolette, managing all the wires and tubes with practiced ease. She placed the tiny baby on Valentina's chest, and immediately, Sophia's breathing seemed to calm. "She knows you," Margaret said. "Babies always know their mothers." Valentina looked down at her daughter, this tiny person who had survived so much already. The fall, the early labor, the trauma of being born into a broken family. And yet here she was, breathing, fighting, living. "Hello, little star," Valentina whispered. "I'm your mama. And I promise you, no matter what happens between your father and me, you will always be loved. You will always be wanted. You will always be enough." Raphael watched this scene, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. His daughter was here, alive and beautiful. But his wife, the woman he'd loved and betrayed, was already building walls around herself and their child. Walls he might never be able to breach. "Can I hold her?" he asked hesitantly. Valentina looked up at him, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of the woman he'd married. The woman who believed in second chances, who saw the good in everyone. "She's your daughter too," Valentina said quietly. Margaret helped transfer Sophia to Raphael's chest, and the moment his daughter's tiny body settled against him, he was lost. This perfect little person, this miracle they'd created together, was depending on him to be better than he'd ever been. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Sophia, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry I almost cost you your life before you even had a chance to live it. I'm sorry I hurt your mother. I'm sorry I'm not the father you deserve. But I promise you, I'm going to spend every day trying to become him." Sophia's tiny hand curled around his finger, and Raphael felt something shift inside him. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but purpose. This little girl would never doubt her father's love, even if her mother could never trust him again. Over the next few weeks, they established a routine. Valentina had been discharged from the hospital, but Sophia would need to stay in the NICU for at least another month. They took turns sitting with her, rarely at the same time, the tension between them too thick for the small space. Valentina had moved into the guest room at home, claiming she needed space to heal. Raphael didn't argue. He'd given up the right to share her bed the moment he'd chosen to share it with someone else. Bianca was gone, of course. She'd packed her things while they were at the hospital and left without a word. Raphael had found her resignation letter on the kitchen counter, full of apologies and excuses that meant nothing now. Elena had extended her stay, helping Valentina navigate this new reality. She was fiercely protective of her sister, barely civil to Raphael, but she adored Sophia from the moment she saw her. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," Elena said, watching Sophia sleep in her isolette. "Look at those eyelashes, she gets those from her mother," Raphael said quietly. Elena glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. "You know, for what it's worth, I think you really do love them." "Love isn't the problem," Raphael replied. "The problem is that love without integrity is just selfishness with better marketing." Elena raised an eyebrow. "That's surprisingly insightful for a cheating husband." "That I've had a lot of time to think, and what have you concluded? That I destroyed the best thing in my life for something that meant nothing. And that no amount of regret can undo that." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Sophia breathe, watching her tiny chest rise and fall with the rhythm of new life. "What are you going to do?" Elena asked. "Whatever Valentina needs me to do. If she wants me to leave, I'll leave. If she wants me to stay and co-parent, I'll stay. If she wants me to disappear entirely, I'll do that too. And what do you want?" "I want to earn back what I threw away. But I know that's not possible. So I want to be the best father I can be to Sophia, and I want to support Valentina in whatever way she'll let me." Elena studied him for a moment. "You know, I came here ready to hate you forever. And I still think what you did was unforgivable. But I also see how much you love that little girl. And despite everything, I see how much you love my sister." "Love isn't enough," Raphael said, echoing Valentina's words. "No," Elena agreed. "But it's a start." That evening, Raphael found Valentina in the nursery they'd painted together months ago. She was sitting in the rocking chair, holding one of the tiny outfits they'd bought for Sophia. "She's so small," Valentina said without looking up. "All these clothes are going to be too big for months. She'll grow into them," Raphael said, leaning against the doorframe. "Will she?" Valentina's voice was soft, uncertain. "Will she grow up healthy? Will she be okay after everything that happened? Dr. Chen says premature babies are fighters. And Sophia is definitely a fighter." Valentina finally looked up at him. "I've been thinking about what you said. About spending your life trying to deserve her, and I think that's exactly what you should do. But not F. or me. Not to win me back or earn my forgiveness. For her. Because she deserves a father who puts her first, always." "I will," Raphael said. "I promise. Don't promise me anything," Valentina said firmly. "Promise her. And then keep that promise, no matter what." The next morning, Raphael found himself alone with Sophia in the NICU. Valentina was at home resting, and Elena had gone back to New York, confident that her sister was strong enough to handle whatever came next. He pulled his chair close to Sophia's isolette and began to talk. "Your mother is the most incredible woman I've ever known," he told his sleeping daughter. "She's kind and generous and trusting, and I took advantage of all of those beautiful qualities. I hurt her in ways that can never be healed." Sophia's eyes fluttered open, as if she were listening. "But you, little star, you're going to know a different kind of love. You're going to know what it means to be someone's whole world. Your mother already loves you more than life itself, and I'm going to spend every day proving that you can count on me too." He reached through the isolette's opening and gently stroked her tiny hand. "I know I can't undo what I did. I can't give you the intact family you deserve. But I can give you parents who love you completely, even if we can't love each other the way we used to." Sophia's fingers curled around his, and Raphael felt that familiar shift in his chest. This was his purpose now. This tiny person who depended on him to be better than he'd ever been. When Valentina arrived an hour later, she found Raphael reading to Sophia from a book of poetry. The same book he'd once read to her during their courtship. She listened from the doorway as he read Pablo Neruda's words about love and loss, his voice soft and full of emotion. When he finished, he looked up and saw her standing there. "That I used to read that to you," he said quietly. "That I remembered that I thought maybe she should hear beautiful words, even if she can't understand them yet." Valentina approached the isolette, her expression unreadable. "That's a good idea. Children should grow up surrounded by beauty, even when the world around them is broken." They stood on opposite sides of their daughter's bed, watching her sleep, both lost in their own thoughts. "That I've made a decision," Valentina said finally. Raphael's heart stopped. "About us? About everything. I'm going to file for divorce." The words hit him like a physical blow, even though he'd been expecting them. "But," she continued, "I want you to be part of Sophia's life. She needs her father, and despite everything, I believe you'll be a good one." "Thank you," Raphael said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That I have conditions. Of course that you'll see her on a schedule that works for both of us. You'll never bring another woman around her unless we've discussed it first and I've approved. And you'll never, ever lie to her the way you lied to me." "That I agree to all of that." "And Raphael?" Valentina's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "If you ever hurt her the way you hurt me, if you ever make her question her worth or her value, I will make sure you never see her again. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good." They stood in silence, watching their daughter breathe, both knowing that this was the end of one story and the beginning of another. 6 weeks later, Sophia was finally strong enough to come home. She was still tiny, barely 6 pounds, but her lungs were strong and her appetite was fierce. Valentina had prepared everything perfectly. The nursery was ready, the bottles sterilized, the car seat properly installed. She'd read every book on premature infant care, consulted with specialists, and created detailed schedules for feeding and sleeping. Raphael helped carry Sophia's things to the car, but he wouldn't be coming home with them. He'd moved into a condo closer to his office, giving Valentina the space she needed to heal and bond with their daughter. "Are you sure you don't want me to stay for the first night?" he asked as they prepared to leave the hospital. "Just in case you need help, I'll be fine," Valentina said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. The truth was, she was terrified. Terrified of being alone with this tiny, fragile person who depended on her for everything. Terrified of making a mistake, of not being enough, of failing as a mother the way she'd failed as a wife, but she was also determined. Determined to prove to herself and to Sophia that they could build a beautiful life together, even if it wasn't the life she'd originally planned. The drive home was quiet, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her car seat. Valentina kept glancing in the rearview mirror, checking on her daughter, marveling at the miracle of her existence. When they arrived at the house, Valentina carried Sophia inside and stood in the foyer, suddenly overwhelmed by the silence. This house had once been filled with laughter and love and the promise of forever. Now it felt like a museum of broken dreams. But as she looked down at Sophia's sleeping face, Valentina felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for reconciliation, not for the restoration of what had been lost, but for the possibility of something new and beautiful rising from the ashes of what had been destroyed. "Welcome home, little star," she whispered. "This is where your story begins." That night, as Valentina sat in the nursery feeding Sophia her bottle, she thought about the conversation she'd had with Elena before she'd left. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" Elena had asked. "That I don't know," Valentina had replied honestly. "Right now, forgiveness feels impossible. But maybe someday, for Sophia's sake, I'll find a way to let go of the anger." "And do you think you'll ever love again?" Valentina had looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I already do," she'd said. "I love her more than I ever thought possible. And maybe that's enough for now." As the weeks turned into months, they found their rhythm. Raphael visited every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and every other weekend. He was punctual, respectful, and completely devoted to Sophia during his time with her. Valentina watched him with their daughter and saw glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with. The way he sang to Sophia in 3 languages, the way he read to her from poetry books, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. But she also saw the weight he carried, the guilt that shadowed his every interaction with both of them. He was trying so hard to be perfect, to prove himself worthy, that sometimes she almost felt sorry for him. One evening, as he was preparing to leave after his visit, Sophia began to cry. Nothing Valentina did could comfort her, and finally, in desperation, she handed the baby to Raphael. Immediately, Sophia calmed, settling against her father's chest with a contented sigh. "She knows you," Valentina said, echoing the NICU nurse's words from months ago. "She knows both of us," Raphael replied. "And somehow, despite everything we've put her through, she loves us anyway." "Children are resilient," Valentina said. "They forgive what adults can't." "Maybe that's what we need to learn from her." Valentina looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe Sophia is going to teach us how to be a family, even if it's not the kind of family we originally planned." "We're not a family, Raphael. We're two people who share a child, but Sophia doesn't know that. To her, we're her parents. We're her whole world. And maybe, for her sake, we can learn to be something more than just two people who share a child." Valentina considered this as she watched Raphael gently rock their daughter. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe we can find a way to co-parent that doesn't involve all this tension and anger. Not for us, but for her." "And how do you propose we do that?" "I don't know," Raphael admitted. "But I think it starts with forgiveness. Not the kind that erases what happened, but the kind that allows us to move forward." Valentina was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not ready for that yet, that I know. And I'll wait as long as it takes." "Don't wait for me, Raphael. Build your life. Find happiness. Just make sure Sophia is always your priority." "She already is." As Raphael prepared to leave that night, Sophia asleep in her crib, he turned to Valentina one last time. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I know I destroyed something beautiful. I know I can never undo that. But I want you to know that loving you and Sophia has been the greatest privilege of my life. Even if I didn't always act like it." Valentina felt tears prick her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Good night, Raphael." "Good night, Val." After he left, Valentina stood in the nursery watching Sophia sleep. Her daughter was growing stronger every day, her personality beginning to emerge. She was curious and alert, with Raphael's dark eyes and Valentina's stubborn chin. "You're going to be okay, little star," Valentina whispered. "We all are. It might not look like the fairy tale I once imagined, but it's going to be real and honest and full of love. And maybe that's better than any fairy tale." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the nursery in shades of gold and amber, Valentina Moreau Sinclair sat in the ruins of her marriage, holding her daughter close, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of acceptance. The peace of knowing that sometimes the most beautiful stories rise from the ashes of the ones that came before, and maybe, she thought as she felt Sophia's steady breathing against her chest, that was enough. Maybe love didn't always look like forever. Maybe sometimes it looked like two broken people learning to be whole for the sake of the tiny person who needed them both. The baby stirred in her arms, and Valentina began to hum a lullaby her own mother had sung to her years ago. A song about hope and healing and the promise that tomorrow could be better than today. Outside, the waves continued their eternal dance against the cliffs, and inside, a new kind of family began to take shape. Not the one any of them had planned, but the one they'd been given. And perhaps, in time, it would be exactly what they all needed. If you believe that every ending can be a new beginning, that love can take many forms, and that sometimes the most broken people can create the most beautiful futures, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Because every story of heartbreak is also a story of hope, and every betrayal can become the foundation for something stronger. What would you do in Valentina's situation? Could you find a way to forgive for the sake of your child? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, your story isn't over just because one chapter ends. Sometimes the best chapters are the ones you write after you thought the book was finished.